I'm 31 now, and until just a few months ago, I thought the hardest part about having relatives involved in your work life was dealing with awkward small talk at holiday dinners. But I was wrong. The real danger comes when the person you've supported for years has secretly been waiting for the perfect moment to tear you down, and uses your generosity as the weapon. This is the story of how my stepbrother tried to ruin everything I built, and how his betrayal backfired into the harshest lesson he'll ever learn. Garrett, my stepbrother, is 3 years younger than me. We've known each other since childhood. Our parents got married when I was 12 and he was 9, so we grew up under the same roof. What I didn't recognize back then was that Garrett had carried a deep resentment toward me from the very start. While I thought we had a fairly normal sibling dynamic, he was quietly jealous of almost everything. My grades, my friendships, even the way our parents praised me. Garrett hated watching anyone else succeed. If I came home with an A, he'd make sure I got in trouble for something unrelated. If I made the baseball team, suddenly rumors about me would start spreading around school. If our parents congratulated me, he'd immediately pull a stunt to redirect attention to himself. I was too young to connect the dots. I thought he was just acting out because of the blended family situation or going through normal phases. What I didn't understand back then was that Garrett was extremely skilled at hiding his true personality from adults. He had this charm he could switch on and off at will. Around teachers or parents, he came across as the sweet but misunderstood younger brother who just needed extra encouragement. But when we were alone, or when it was just kids around, he showed who he really was. Petty, manipulative, and without an ounce of empathy. After high school, I went straight into construction. I started at the very bottom as a laborer, learned electrical work for 2 years, then picked up plumbing before moving into project management and site supervision. By working hard, I climbed up from grunt work to crew chief, then project foreman, and eventually site superintendent for a mid-sized commercial construction company. I spent nearly a decade earning my way into running teams of 30 men on big projects. Garrett, meanwhile, spent those years drifting in and out of community college and low-level jobs. What I didn't realize was that during this time, he was also watching me closely, studying my career path and quietly looking for ways to discredit me. He would ask our parents oddly specific questions about my work, then twist that information into stories that made me look arrogant or undeserving. He told people that I got promotions by playing politics, not because of skill, and spread lies that I mistreated my crew. By 26, Garrett lost his retail job, not because of bad luck like he claimed, but because of his terrible attitude and inability to work with others. In our small town, his reputation for being difficult caught up with him, and he couldn't land another position. That's when our stepmother, Iris, called me. "He's struggling," she said over the phone. "He really admires the career you've built. Maybe you could help him get on his feet." What Iris didn't know was that Garrett had been waiting for this very opportunity. He deliberately sabotaged his own employment so he could ask for my help. Not because he wanted to change his life, but because he finally had a way to get close enough to try and wreck mine. Despite my doubts, I agreed to help him. Family is family, after all, and I was doing well enough that I felt a responsibility to give him a chance. My company was always hiring dependable workers. Garrett didn't have construction experience, but he was physically able, and he looked eager to start fresh. I spoke to my boss, Frank, and vouched for Garrett. I told him he was family, but also stressed I wouldn't recommend anyone who couldn't pull their weight. Thanks to my track record, Frank trusted me and gave Garrett a shot as a general laborer. For someone new, it was good pay with clear paths to move up if he showed commitment. I even co-signed Garrett's apartment lease, lent him money for boots and gear, and introduced him to my contacts in the industry. I made sure he knew what the work culture expected. What I thought was me helping a family member was actually me arming him with everything he needed for his sabotage plan. At first, Garrett played the role perfectly. He showed up early, asked questions, worked hard, and won over the crew with his charm. He acted grateful for the opportunity I'd given him. But beneath the surface, he was already gathering intel, studying how things worked, identifying weak points, and keeping detailed notes. His goal wasn't to build a career. It was to gather enough ammunition to take me down. The first red flag came one afternoon when I overheard him on the phone during lunch. He was talking about gathering evidence and building a timeline. When I asked about it, he brushed it off as helping a friend with legal stuff. It didn't sit right with me. After that, I started paying closer attention. Soon, I noticed he wasn't just curious about construction work. He was obsessed with company policies, OSHA rules, and safety regulations. Not because he cared about safety, but because he was looking for something to use against me. His questions weren't the questions of a beginner. They were probing for weaknesses. What I didn't realize then was that Garrett had convinced himself my success should have been his. He believed that if he could destroy my career, it would somehow elevate him. He wasn't content to just get me fired. He wanted to ruin my reputation so badly I'd never work in construction again. Garrett had gained the perfect position. Inside access to my work life, the trust of my boss, and the ability to create problems that all pointed back to me. He wasn't planning a prank. He was staging a professional execution. And soon, his betrayal would begin to unfold. Garrett had already built up a trail of evidence where he claimed to have raised safety concerns I supposedly brushed off. So this scaffolding incident would slot neatly into his story of me being a careless supervisor who valued speed over worker protection. What he didn't know was that for the past 6 weeks, I'd been running my own quiet investigation into his behavior. There were simply too many suspicious coincidences. Hazards appearing out of nowhere, communication issues that didn't add up, and missing paperwork under strange circumstances. I started by reviewing site security footage and quickly discovered that Garrett often stayed late under the guise of studying manuals. In reality, he was tampering with equipment, moving files and accessing areas and systems he had no business touching. Even worse, I uncovered his infamous journal and realized that much of what he'd written had never happened. Conversations were fabricated, events were twisted, and his supposed reports to me were pure invention. He wasn't recording safety issues. He was inventing a history of negligence to pin on me. I traced client complaints back to Garrett's secret conversations with subcontractors and found proof he'd been deliberately spreading lies about delays and poor management. His concerned employee act was nothing more than cover for orchestrated sabotage. The most damning discoveries came when I examined each supposed safety incident. Every single time, the evidence showed Garrett himself had either caused the hazard or broken protocol intentionally, while later claiming he was just following my orders. He wasn't finding problems, he was creating them. Rather than confront him too early, I decided to let him walk into his own trap. I knew his scaffolding stunt would be his biggest move yet, so I arranged for hidden cameras to cover that exact area. I also made sure Frank would be available that morning. Alongside that, I gathered every piece of proof I'd collected into a full report of Garrett's sabotage campaign. The night before his planned, big reveal, one final piece of evidence landed in my lap. A coworker overheard Garrett bragging on the phone that his plan was nearly complete. "By next week, you'll be fired for safety violations," Garrett gloated. "Then I'll be the obvious replacement. He's going to lose everything, and I'll finally get to watch it happen." That call erased any remaining doubt. This wasn't about safety, it was about revenge, fueled by years of bitterness and jealousy. Garrett had plotted my downfall from the day he asked me for help, and he thought he was untouchable. The next morning, Garrett arrived early and executed his scheme. The cameras caught him loosening bolts and pulling safety pins from the scaffolding, setting it up to collapse under weight. He worked with practiced efficiency, clearly having planned every move. When the rest of the crew arrived, Garrett staged his discovery. He climbed partway up, paused dramatically, then shouted, "Hey, this scaffolding isn't secure. These joints are loose and pins are missing. This is dangerous. Someone could get seriously hurt." Frank rushed over and confirmed the equipment was unsafe. Garrett immediately began playing the hero, loudly questioning how such an obvious hazard could have been missed. "Isn't the supervisor supposed to check this? This is basic stuff," he said, making sure the crew heard every word. But instead of congratulating him, Frank told everyone we'd need to check the security footage. Garrett's face drained of color as Frank explained cameras had monitored the site overnight. "Let's head to the trailer and review the footage," Frank said firmly. Garrett tried to object, insisting the priority was just fixing the danger. But Frank held his ground, knowing the cause was just as important as fixing the hazard. Garrett had no choice but to follow. Inside the trailer, the footage played in front of the crew. It clearly showed Garrett dismantling safety features hours earlier. The room went silent. Frank turned to him and asked flatly, "What exactly are we watching here?" Garrett stammered excuses, claiming he was doing maintenance or fixing pre-existing problems, but his explanations crumbled under the obvious reality. Every action was deliberate sabotage. This footage shows you deliberately compromising safety equipment, Frank said coldly. Then this morning you pretended to discover the danger you created. Explain yourself. That's when I laid out the binder of evidence I'd prepared. Security videos of Garrett tampering late at night, side-by-side comparisons of his fake journal entries against actual site records, and proof that every supposed negligence tied back to his sabotage. This hasn't been a one-off, I told them. Garrett has spent months deliberately manufacturing safety violations and spreading lies to make it look like I was failing at my job. His goal wasn't safety, it was to destroy my career. The evidence was airtight. Garrett's carefully constructed persona as the worried employee fell apart instantly. His so-called journal of my failures was shown to be nothing but fiction built to frame me. Frank suspended Garrett immediately and launched a full investigation. Within hours, HR and company security confirmed everything I'd uncovered. They also found records of his secret conversations with clients where he had been planting seeds of doubt about my leadership. This is one of the most malicious cases of sabotage I've ever seen, the HR director told us. He didn't just break rules, he created life-threatening conditions to frame his supervisor. People could have died. On top of that, the investigation uncovered recordings where Garrett bragged about his plan to ruin me, mocking how easy it would be. These tapes eliminated any chance of him claiming misunderstanding or accident. Garrett was terminated on the spot, but that was just the beginning. The company reported him to regulators who launched their own probe. His actions weren't just violations, they were criminal. Creating hazards and filing false safety reports carried heavy penalties, including prison time. News of his actions spread quickly. In construction, safety is everything, and Garrett was soon blacklisted across the region. No contractor would ever risk hiring someone who had endangered lives, but I didn't stop there. Among Garrett's files, I found detailed notes and photos documenting how he staged each hazard. Ironically, the very records he thought would frame me became devastating evidence against him. Prosecutors used them to prove intent and premeditation, making it impossible for him to argue it was carelessness. He faced multiple felony charges, including reckless endangerment and falsifying safety reports. With overwhelming evidence stacked against him, his lawyer urged him to take a plea deal. He pled guilty, receiving jail time, probation, and restitution. His construction career, and frankly any future in safety-sensitive industries, was over for good. Our parents were horrified when the truth came out. Iris, the one who had begged me to give him a chance, broke down in tears. "I thought I was helping him start over," she said. "I never dreamed he'd put innocent people at risk just to hurt you." Months later, I received a letter from Garrett. It was part of a counseling program, but instead of real remorse, it was mostly bitter justification. He admitted outright that he'd hated me since childhood. "Every promotion you earned felt like it should have been mine," he wrote. "When I asked for that job, I wasn't looking for a new start. I was looking for my chance to bring you down." Even in what was supposed to be an apology, he revealed his obsession. He wasn't sorry, he was resentful that his plan failed. But in the end, the most satisfying part wasn't his conviction or downfall. It was how the truth strengthened my reputation. Frank promoted me to regional superintendent for exposing Garrett's sabotage and protecting worker safety. Other companies even reached out to recruit me after hearing the story. "You could have lost everything if you hadn't caught him," Frank told me during my promotion meeting. "The false record he was building might have ended your career. Instead, you protected this company and its workers. You saved lives." Looking back, I realize Garrett's plan to destroy me accomplished the opposite. He tried to bury my career but instead cemented my place in the industry and destroyed his own future in the process. In the end, Garrett's sabotage didn't break me, it built me. Every trap he set became the proof of my strength. Every lie he told exposed the truth of who he really was. He wanted me ruined, but instead, he handed me the greatest victory of my career. Garrett thought he was writing the story of my downfall, but all along, he was just the villain in the chapter of my rise. And while his name is now whispered in blacklists and court records, mine is etched in promotions, respect, and trust. He wanted me to fall, but I'm still standing higher than ever, while he's the one who will never climb again. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to leave a comment, hit subscribe, follow for more, and turn on the bell icon so you never miss the next one. Backhand index pointing right.